If you're someone who loves lyrics, you've probably heard of Gillian Welch. Her lyric writing is graceful and calculated and definitely inspires moments of reflection after listening. Today, I'm going to discuss why I love the song, Dark Turn of Mind. Hello and welcome to Music Theories, where we explain and analyze all topics related to music. Be sure to subscribe for more content, especially if you're a music geek like me. I definitely encourage you to go listen to Dark Turn of Mind if you haven't before. Just kind of sit with it for a minute before you watch this and form some thoughts, and leave them in the comments because I would love to see how they compare and contrast with my own. In June of 2011, Gillian Welch released her 5th studio album, The Harrow and the Harvest, after an 8-year gestation period. Welch states that this gap was largely due to a somewhat natural dissatisfaction with what she and her longtime guitarist and musical partner David Rawlings were writing. Welch and Rawlings met at Berklee College of Music in the early 90s, and they have navigated their careers side by side ever since. The album title, The Harrow and the Harvest, is a metaphor for those taxing 8 years where she and Rawlings tirelessly grappled with ideas they found inadequate, endlessly probing for what felt right. Gillian describes this as the deepest frustration they've come through. And as a songwriter myself, I can absolutely say I understand this frustration. But the result was worthwhile. The album is highly regarded, sincere, and liberating, as is the production on the record. Each song is done in 1 or 2 takes, with some of the music spontaneously composed by David Rawlings there in the studio. These rough edges and imperfections were freeing for the two, as they learned to accept the blemishes and created 10 tracks that are genuine, organic, and powerful. The Harrow and the Harvest was nominated for Best Folk Album and Best Engineered Album at the Grammys that year, and received widely positive reviews from music critics. Dark Turn of Mind is my personal favorite from this album, and as all opinions are, that could be steeped in any existing bias based on my taste and experiences. But even so, I'm going to share my thoughts, starting with my favorite part, the lyrics. The form of the song is very simple. There are 3 verses and a bridge after the second. Each verse ends with a similar line, so this would be considered a verse-refrain song, the refrain being a dark turn of mind. The first verse lets us in on the story, but just enough that we can kind of assume what's happened to the protagonist.
Take me and love me if you want me. But don't ever treat me unkind, 'cause I had that trouble already, and it left me with a dark turn of mind.
We know 2 major things about the character. She was in some sort of relationship where she was treated harshly, and this ended up being traumatic for her. It appears that whoever she's talking to is a new love interest, so this verse serves almost as an emotional baggage warning for this new admirer. But the speaker doesn't have any particular desperation for new love. Instead, she seems to be almost indifferent. It's not take me and love me, period. It's take me and love me if you want me.
If is good.
For me, this hits so much harder. From one line, we can already tell that this person is not in a great place emotionally, but even so stands direct and assertive. The next line being, don't ever treat me unkind. The phrase, dark turn of mind, insinuates that this character wasn't always so bleak. A reminder, this is our refrain line, so it holds the most weight and all other lines will be centered around it thematically. Whatever she went through, she's not willing to do it again, and she's certainly not willing to waste her time. Verse 2 begins to describe how the perspective of life has changed in general.
Now I see the bones in the river, and I feel the wind through the pine, and I hear the shadows are calling to a girl with a dark turn of mind.
Gillian does this through beautiful imagery rather than just outright saying it. These lines highlight that glass half full mentality that people talk about often, and the symbolism here gets pretty deep. One could look at a river and see something lovely, something natural and grand, and maybe admire how the sunshine reflects off the surface. Or one could look at a river and think about all of its very dark secrets. They could think about anyone who met an unfortunate end in that river. Similarly, a pine tree can be seen as sturdy and everlasting, one of the only trees that doesn't shed its foliage entirely in the winter. These trees are a symbol of resilience in the cold. The speaker doesn't see the tree this way anymore. She sees it for its weaknesses and its empty spaces. I could be reading way too much into this because I tend to do that, but these images could be symbolism for love as well. Love could be really exciting, or it could be a reminder of all the times you were hurt. But in a grander sense, someone with a dark turn of mind won't see life for all of its beauty. They'll see it for all of its pain and its suffering. The shadows that Gillian writes about are these ominous thoughts that appear and suddenly become normal. Anyone who's experienced periods of depression in their life will recognize this metaphor. The glass will almost always appear half empty. Then comes the bridge, just when we start to feel pity for the protagonist.
But oh, ain't the night time so lovely to see? And don't all the night birds sing sweetly? You never know how happy I'd be when the sun's going down.
The bridge kind of changes the whole tone from the first two verses. The song starts very sinisterly, but here we see little flickers of contentment. This character has sort of found comfort in the darkness. There are silver linings. The night birds come out and sing their sweet songs. It appears she's become familiar with the nighttime and actually starts to prefer it. If she's changed, she might as well find the beauty in that and make the best of it. And finally, the concluding verse is one of true self-acceptance.
Leave me if I'm feeling too lonely. Full as the fruit on the vine. You know, some girls are bright as the morning, and some have a dark turn of mind.
The first line states that the admirer, or the person being spoken to, has an option to stay, knowing what he or she knows. This person could leave if they feel that this is too much, but they shouldn't expect that the speaker will change. The speaker has become fully independent, and full as the fruit on the vine without someone by her side. The final refrain line really solidifies her concession. This time the line is stated matter-of-factly. Some girls are bright as the morning, and some have a dark turn of mind. She then repeats the refrain as a tag, but changes it to some girls are blessed with a dark turn of mind. This verifies that she's not only accepted herself for who she is, but she's grateful for her experiences and learned from them. This resolution is so beautifully calculated and satisfying. I think what I love most about how well these lyrics are crafted is the density that each line has in this story. The whole song is a total of 16 lines, but there's been character development within those 16 lines that a lot of people can really resonate with if they've experienced a dark turn of mind. And within that character development, there's a bit of hope that's offered for the listener, a happy ending in a kind of twisted but realistic way. An effective verse-refrain song, in my experience, can be really difficult to write for this reason. There's only so many lines, so each one of them has to count. Gillian and David did this very well, and I can't tell you how many times I've come back to this tune for remedy. In regards to the music, upon first listen, the song does fit in quite nicely with a typical folk Americana label. It sounds a bit like lullaby as well, because of its 3/4 time signature. The phrasing of the lyrics is sparse, leisurely, and feels gentle on the ears, and the bluesy quality of the melody makes it feel a little dark. With a verse-refrain song, there's usually a particular musical arc within a verse that serves to highlight the refrain. We see this with both the melody and the chord progression. The progression will typically begin with something diatonic and comfortable, and then progress to something less diatonic, thus making the resolution of the refrain very satisfying. When we use the term diatonic in music, we are referring to the chords within that key. Without getting too much into it, chords that are diatonic will sound more familiar and more stable. This song is in the key of F. However, it begins on a D minor chord, which establishes darkness immediately. D minor is the relative minor of the F chord, which almost makes it sound like a more somber version of F. In a particular key, the fifth chord is known as the dominant chord. The dominant chord has the tendency to resolve to the tonic chord, which in this case is F. It's common for songwriters to borrow dominance from other keys to establish a stronger resolution to a particular chord. These are known as secondary dominants because they don't resolve to the tonic. For example, A7 resolving to D minor, even though you're in the key of F. In this song, not only are they using secondary dominants, but the secondary dominants used don't always resolve to the chord that the ear expects them to resolve to. For example, there's a G7 that should resolve to a C, but resolves to a B flat. Welch and Rawlings employ this use of secondary dominance within the first line. This establishes instability right off the bat. Then we move to the 4 chord, and then to a different secondary dominant. The third line begins with the 1 chord, which sounds happy, but then ends with a dark cadence, the minor 4, which is again borrowed from another key. In the last line, the refrain, stability is finally established with the classic 1-5-1 progression. I think this progression is a beautiful musical representation of what the speaker is going through. It begins very dark and unstable and gradually moves towards comfort and balance. The bridge is almost completely diatonic to the key, meaning it doesn't borrow from any other keys and sounds serene compared to the verses. If you recall from the lyric analysis, the bridge is the point where the speaker is growing comfortable with darkness and actually begins to prefer it. The progression appears so carefully selected to match the storyline arc, while underneath, we have a descending bass line that creates a haunting familiarity for the listener. Not to mention that Rawlings' voicings and embellishments weave a rich and warm texture that's pleasing to the ear. This song is excellent as far as carefully selecting every detail goes, both musically and lyrically. What seems like a lovely folk lullaby is more than meets the ear. It's complicated and feeble, but compelling and resilient. It's one that is both painfully raw and comforting for those who know heartbreak well. This is my personal analysis of this song and why I enjoy it as much as I do, but if you have any additional input or differing thoughts, please feel free to leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.